So I'll pass over to you, Gavin, to be able to think about some specific case examples, if that's all right.
This is one of the most popular phrases, let's think together in our service, and it is probably the thing that we at least think about most frequently in team meetings. However, it'd be fair to say that we probably get as far as stage 2 sometimes, stating the case. Quite often we forget entirely to mentalise the affect, definitely in the moment, or in terms of just talking about our feelings around about the case. Fairly spectacularly sometimes we fail to return to purpose. Lots of nods. I don't know what we're talking about here, which is excellent. And as I'm living into, or I have the potential to live into, in this moment and the ones that follow, there is in the a quote from certain 2 authors that's in the AMBIT approach, this idea that one should expect errors in communication as well as thinking about how you, as well as that kind of structure for thinking together, this idea that you can actually expect communication to break down at certain points in time. But one of the key challenges is, do we actually live into this? Do we live into it as individuals who are often quite kind of driven and high standards for ourselves? And what happens when you have a team of people who have those high standards for themselves and also who are really, really worried about some of the kids that they work with? Another direct quote from the online manual, which is more of the same in the sense that conflicts, not only are errors in communication expected, but conflicts are almost inevitable and to be anticipated and planned for. And we've to somehow we've to practice forgiving our colleagues and maintaining a kind of assumption about best intentions of them. All of which is a lead into the examples we're going to show you, if we've got time. And also, I'm a big fan of this quote here, which ties in with what we're saying. So this is Leonard Cohen, a song called Anthem. And if you can't read that there, it says, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering, there is a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in. What I like about that is it's a very poetic summary of imperfection, which I am definitely embodying. This is a story of a case of a young girl with anorexia that was reviewed by 2 outpatient colleagues late one Thursday afternoon, which might be this might be a story that's familiar to people. So late one day, they think that the assessor is being dehydrated and needing Tier 4 services to be involved straight away. So what they do from that moment of, they sort of step out of the meeting with the young person and the father still there. One of them phones the ITS, the other one phones the inpatient unit, and one of them gives a slightly different account to the other one, and as a coincidence in a sense, they both get a different message from the other end as well, if you see what I mean. Not just because they gave a different account of the story, but they both received a different response. In the meantime, the inpatient unit psychiatrist agreed to review this person, I think late on the Friday, as an emergency, with an understanding that based on that person's assessment, the young person might then be admitted either to the inpatient unit or be looked after by the intensive treatment service. Middle point there, psychiatrists did do what they said they would do, however that person didn't agree with an understanding that the young person was dehydrated and effectively discharged the young person back to Tier 3, back to outpatients. And he did so by emailing them, which was standard practice at the time. It wasn't an agreed practice, it wasn't something we just explicitly talked about, but that's what he did. And one of the many problems with that was the Tier 3 colleagues had then actually gone on holiday, unbeknownst to anybody in Tier 4, and basically because the psychiatrist sent off the email, he assumed that responsibility would go back to Tier 3, well they assumed that actually it would remain with Tier 4, and he took no response as acceptance of his decision. So there was this created a vacuum in which nothing happened with the young person for about a week, which caused an understandable amount of anxiety for the young person and probably more for the young person's father, because the young person was in that very, very ambivalent stage of, well, really pre-contemplative stage of engaging with treatment, i.e. not really wanting it, with everybody else being worried about them. Once the father started phoning people and complaining about what had happened, quite rightly, we all sort of scrambled around trying to make amends for it and did our best with that. That was kind of resolved, but in the meantime, our outpatient colleagues, they were so enraged by what our psychiatrist colleague did that they wrote a letter of complaint to our heads of service. And I don't know, anyone who works in, well, maybe it's the same for every organisation, but if you work in the NHS and there's a written letter of complaint, it automatically creates anxiety. Certainly in our service, they're taken very, very seriously. There's a really concrete plan, and people do get quite stressed out about them. In theory, of course, we're meant to learn from them and everything, you know, it'd be a pretty cool process, but in reality, it can be quite stressful. So, as a consequence of the letter, and actually the anxiety about scrabbling around to try and make amends for the vacuum, both outpatients and ourselves were really irritated with each other for a while, and kind of very entrenched views for a bit. Thankfully, we have a senior manager who's done some AMBIT training, so there was a combination of clout, you know, authority, confidence and ability that this person already had, and some AMBIT training. And this person said, hang on a minute, you know, never mind your letter, let's all get in a room and have a chat about this. And it was done in a let's think together style, in the sense that everyone was allowed to say anything that they wanted to say, and while they were speaking, everyone else just had to listen in a respectful way. So it was a sort of nice, tough love kind of banging of heads together. And from that, we did actually get quite a good outcome, in the sense that our relationships were recovered because people had a chance to say what was on their minds in part and let go of that, and actually remembered that generally speaking we all get on, and most of the time things go a whole lot better than this. So the concrete action plan included things like never ever again will somebody communicate a big decision like a discharge by email. There has to be, as I'm saying there, human-to-human contact of some kind, either a phone call or ideally some kind of face-to-face discussion. And even then, it's our responsibility to ask outpatient colleagues when they are ready to take a case. Partly because if we mentalise what's going on for them, they are extremely pressured in terms of the amount of referrals they're getting, and actually their capacity to mentalise sometimes is quite limited. For very, very good reasons. So we have to wait until they say, yes, I will take this case, and this is the date upon which it can start, rather than assumptions being made. We also now do all have email signatures, although there's still one or two niggles with that, that tells you when somebody normally works, because we have a whole lot of issues about part-time staff, and people, you know, in the past we get annoyed because we've sent off an email, there's no response back, so they're thinking, well, why is this person delaying thinking about it? But actually, if we knew what hours they worked, we might already be a bit calmer about it. And also, very, very simple thing, but actually putting an out-of-office message on your email is a really, really helpful thing, for us anyway. And we did talk explicitly about perhaps when there are problems, we should try speaking to each other first and getting in a room. And that has actually happened, and with the people that are involved in this scenario since then. And we did do an awful lot of talking about, well, what is supposed to happen with urgent situations, really? Should you be phoning the ITS and the inpatient unit? And the answer to that is no, you shouldn't really be phoning two people, and there shouldn't be two people making two separate phone calls, that kind of stuff. When we planned this, we thought about two examples where things went wrong, and quite badly wrong, in a sense, and one example where things seem to have gone quite well, actually. And it does involve some of the same staff who were involved in the first case example. So we had, in respect for the evidence base and the training that Fiona's talked about, we had a young person being seen for family-based therapy in relation to their anorexia. So the parents and this young person were being met with, and they started down that track, which was the right thing to do. However, the situation got worse, as is sometimes the case, in the sense that there wasn't any spectacular gains in this person's physical health, but more worryingly, some of her more impulsive behaviour seemed to be getting worse and worse and worse. Huge amounts of exercising, some of it in secret, some of it not, and some highly explosive outbursts of distress. For example, running around her parents' garden, screaming and shouting and that kind of thing. Also, the Tier 3 staff had a concern that the family would just find FBT very difficult because they wondered about the family history of mental health problems, and particularly one of the parents wondered about the father's health and how that might impact on his ability to actually robustly contain eating. So they asked us for more support, and we did decide to drop FBT in favour of a much more complicated package, because although Fiona quite rightly described often we need to simplify things, but in this case we really went for it with quite a complex network, but it's one that's actually worked. So this young person now gets one-to-one psychological support, is in her over 12s day programme. There's family work going on of a slightly different kind to FBT. The parents have been invited and are able to attend our parent support group for people with eating disorders, and there's all these staff involved, and happily enough it's working. Actually, we somehow managed to keep this network going, providing a consistent message. There's a bit of happy news.